I think feminism is just about us all having like the same amount of rights. And
what rights do women not have
in
that
general,
men have?
I mean, just I mean,
like, where do you think there's inequality in society between men and women?
well, I just mean like
Women in
it's
sports.
Because all the gender men are coming in. Fair
that
point
is a
there.
hot topic.
Well, just like
What do you mean?
Women in sports in general, I think,
Because-
get paid less because there's less viewers for.
Well, that's why
women's
they get
sports.
paid less, because
Well,
there's less viewers.
right, but we also
I'm just saying my definition of it is really broad.
I agree with her.
And if someone didn't think
Okay, wait, but back, so no one can give an example of where women don't have the same rights as men, but that's why you think we should, or that's why you wouldn't date a man who doesn't identify as a feminist, but you can't give one example of where women and men aren't equal, except for women getting paid less in sports.
I have a fascinating question that now it just popped into my head. I'm going to ask Natalie about. Joining me now, hero for going through that kind of misery, Natalie Winters, co-host of The Wonderful War Room and founder of She's So Right. All right, Natalie, before we get to those women and feminism and all this stuff, it occurred to me as I was watching. I have 2 teenage sons, and I watch them, when they get with their friends, they get progressively dumber. And there's this old saying that young men, when they get together, that you have to take the lowest IQ in the group and then divide that by the number of boys in the group, and that's the collective IQ. They just get dumber. And when you add more boys, they get dumber and dumber and dumber, and the things they do will be dumber. Does that same thing apply to women? Are they really that dumb because there's a lot of them together?
I think so. As the woman expert right now, at least on this show, I would say I think it does kind of hold a lot of water. And I think when it comes to feminism and a lot of these kind of cultural ideologies that people hold, or at least purport to hold, when they don't actually know why they hold them. If you watch the kind of longer extended version of this discussion, they say, well, Natalie, the only reason that you're sort of making us look like idiots right now is because you're better educated on this topic because you work in media. And my background actually is nothing in the cultural stuff. It's in Chinese Communist Party infiltration. And I said to them, that's not really a way for you to get out of any responsibility of being accountable for your own beliefs. And the fact that I'm better researched than you, implying that you actually haven't done any research, I think shows you that you hold a lot of these beliefs, not because you actually, to your core, to your morals and ethics, think they're true, but you've just kind of gone along with the mainstream viewpoints that society tells you to believe. So whether it's a dumbing down or just kind of conforming with, I think, how society wants you to be, I think there is sort of some lowest common denominator element of your critique that is very applicable in this situation.
Natalie, why the lack of curiosity? And I mean it like this. I obviously, there's many things I don't know anything about. In fact, most things. But if I held a strong stance on something and someone like you pressed me on it, and I didn't have any depth of knowledge, I would want to go find some. I would be embarrassed if you pressed me on something that I was speaking about as if I was some authority, and it turns out I was a moron. I would feel convicted. I got to go read something. Do you get that from them? I mean, I've watched several clips of this. It's been floating around online. You did wonderful, by the way. They just look so dumb. I'd be so self-conscious if I looked that dumb. Do you get the impression they're self-conscious?
I don't even think they internalize it as being dumb. I think they have really never, my estimation is that they really have just never been exposed to a young woman like myself, to young women who watch your show, to other young women that you've had on this program who don't self-identify as feminists. And I think that that's sort of a cornerstone, right, of, I'll call it what it is, a lot of these cultish ideologies that are very pervasive on the left, where these girls don't really even know that there is an alternative to not being a feminist. And you hit the nail on the head when you would think there would be some level of like, oh my goodness, I'm so uneducated. Here I am saying that I would refuse to date a feminist. Yet earlier in the conversation, they couldn't even define what a feminist is. And I think we love to throw around the word, indoctrination and what they teach on these college campuses. But I think at the core of it, the crux of it is really just a lack of critical thinking and thinking for oneself, right? Because then they haven't actually put these ideologies kind of through the ringer of evaluation and understanding why they actually hold them. So when they're sitting there with all their girlfriends, it's just a lot easier to say you're a feminist because frankly, you could probably skate through life and never get any pushback as to why you're not a feminist. Whereas myself, someone who has never identified as that, since I was in ninth grade, in high school, I was having teachers and administrators press me and say I was a sexist for not holding those beliefs. So I think it's sort of a survival of the ideological fittest.
Did you girls talk about abortion?
I think the girls who vote based off of it, which there's another clip, perhaps you'll play it, that the female vote is whipped up, I think oftentimes focused primarily on that issue. A lot of the girls on the panel agreed to that, but I made the point, you say you're so well educated on abortion and feminism. I just showed you don't actually know anything. Isn't it kind of bizarre that you just said that's the primary issue that drives you to vote and select for candidates? Meanwhile, they also say that when Republicans are like, oh, abortion is just an issue that's being used to whip up the female vote, they also think that that's crazy and that's sexist and it's demeaning to women. It's anti-feminist, right? So I always kind of describe it as it's like picking up this trudge, this mess of seaweed in the ocean where all these ideologies are so interconnected and they create this kind of ecosystem where you can't press them on any aspect of it because it's sort of this feedback loop, right? Where if you try to engage with them on abortion, then you're a sexist. If you try to engage with them on feminism, you can't because you're pro-choice. And that's why that's why I do shows like the Whatever podcast, because I think a lot of times it's, no offense, we love straight white men, but when straight white men are, trying to punch down, frankly, on girls like these, they sort of have the easy caveat. They can write them off as, oh, well, you're a straight white guy, so you're internally sexist. But I think when they're forced to reckon with a girl who's their age, in some cases younger than them, it's sort of shattering to their worldview. And that was kind of my takeaway from that podcast, that they had truly never met someone like me. And not that I'm all that rare. I would say the majority of the country thinks like myself, but they're just not exposed to it because they want us to be scared and afraid of speaking out, because then you don't have, moments and conversations like the one you just played.
I think we can feel great about our economy.
I was going to ask you what you made of this last jobs report.
Well, it just shows that U.S. is firing on all cylinders.
Man, things are going so well. I am excited. I'm excited to hear that. Joining me now, Carol Roth. She is a world-famous author at this point in time. Her latest book is outstanding. You Will Own Nothing. You know Carol well. I don't even have to introduce her anymore. Okay, Carol, 3.5% inflation. It's obviously much, much, much worse than that, but that's the official number they're going with. What should we do with all this stuff?
Well, the inflation report did come in hotter than Jesse Kelly after eating a bucket of extra spicy wings, which is layman's term for, yes, it was even worse than Wall Street expected. And as you mentioned, we know that the number that they published is far below what the issues are that are being felt by average Americans who are having trouble buying food, paying their rent and mortgages, and just getting by with living, except that the elite want to not only tell you that you're wrong, it's bad enough that they have created this situation that you're in, but they need to gaslight you. They need to tell you that you don't know what you're talking about, that they have a chart, and that things are going really well. And I think that's really part of the frustration here, is that not only have they created this completely predictable situation that was entirely avoidable, and now after they have burnt the house down, the arsonist is standing there and going, no, the house isn't burnt down. I don't know what you're talking about. It looks great. And I think that's where people are really feeling the extra gut punch, because they're hurting. And instead of acknowledging that we've screwed up, no, these people who have created this issue are telling you that you're doing phenomenal, that the economy is charging on all cylinders. Well, it's charging on all cylinders from an inflationary standpoint, but you have, debt's charging on all cylinders. The deficit is charging on all cylinders. Interest is charging all cylinders. So I guess technically she's correct in some ways, but unfortunately it's also charging right off a fiscal cliff.
Carol, to get to the basics of this, and I know this is very basic, the numbers can get confusing for stupid people like me. We see inflation at 3.5%, And yet you dig into the numbers, and here are some of them. Car insurance up 22%, car repair 12%, baby formula 10%, veterinarian 10%, rent 5.9%, electricity 5%, restaurants 4%. I don't see 3.5 anywhere on here. And Carol, I may have failed algebra many, many, many times, and that's a true story, by the way. But even I know if you add up a bunch of numbers that are all above 3.5 and then divide them by the amount of items on the list, you can't possibly get to 3.5. So how are we at 3.5, Carol?
Yes, some other items that they've thrown into the list that they say are negative and are counteracting these things, those things that, not everybody's buying because they can't afford to buy them, Jesse, because they, have used up all their money on basic things like commodities and rent. But as we said before, the numbers themselves are trash. Not only has the government had a hard time getting people to respond to these surveys that they do and entities to respond, so they have more modeling and more biases in the data, but they've changed their methodology for the way that they've computed this many times since 1980. So the data isn't reliable. And I think this is why you're getting the disconnect between the Paul Krugmans of the world and these other corporate press mouthpieces. And Biden administration folks were going, well, look at these things that say everything's going so great. And then people who are going to the grocery store and the gas station, they should really conduct these interviews. I think one of my Twitter followers said this, at a gas station or, at a grocery store, have Janet Yellen sit down with the media, at the end of the register after somebody has checked out their groceries and have her tell them directly that that number on the screen isn't real and that the economy is firing on all cylinders. I think maybe we would get a different outcome.
Many people have asked me what my position is on abortion and abortion rights. My view is now that we have abortion where everybody wanted it from a legal standpoint, the states will determine by vote or legislation or perhaps both, and whatever they decide must be the law of the land, in this case, the law of the state.
All right. Everybody has an opinion about Trump putting out his abortion opinion today. I certainly have many of my own, but I want to hear from Terry and Brianna first. Joining me now, Terry Schilling, president of the American Principles Project, and Brianna Lyman, of course, of the Federalist. I love the freaking Federalist. Okay, Terry, I'll give it to you first, and I'll hand it over to Brianna once you're done, or she can just take it from there. You saw the video from Trump. Were you standing and cheering? Were you bashing your head off the desk? How do you react?
Well, let's start with the good. The good is that he starts off with a very pro-life message, takes a victory lap for getting Roe v. Wade overturned. And then also, this is the most important part, is he punches Democrats right in the teeth by going after them for abortion extremism. Now, what's disappointing, Jesse, is I think a lot of people in the pro-life movement were expecting him to come out in support of some gestational limit. And I use that word very specifically, limit. We do not support a ban. We support limiting abortion until the 15th week when the baby can feel pain. And we give some exceptions for that in rape, incest, and life of the mother. That would have been, I think, the smart political play. It would have allowed him to go on offense and actually distance himself from any of the more radical and extreme versions of abortion limits in the state level. But right now, we've got our pro-life president. We've got to get him over the finish line. But there's still a long way to go. We can still get a more solid commitment out of him down the road.
Yeah, Terry,
Brianna, you bashing head or cheering?
I think I'm neither right now. I think that Donald Trump is in between a rock and a hard place because Republicans have never had a unified message on abortion. You have people who say there should be no abortions, people who say 6 weeks, and those who say 12 to 15. Democrats have been able to exploit this because they are unified. They know that they want a minimum of 12 weeks, if not, some people want 9 months, right? But they can all gather around and coalesce around the central idea is that abortion should be legal. And so they've been able to say, well, we're going to define the Republicans' message for them if they're not willing to do so. And since Donald Trump did not come out and specify a limit, I think they're going to, again, exploit that. That being said, I don't think abortion is the winning issue Democrats hope it will be. So Politico, they did a great analysis actually a few weeks ago, and they looked at 5 states who had abortion referendums on their ballots. And yes, those voters in those states kept abortion, but the voter turnout, it wasn't driven because Democrats, turned out in large swaths. it was actually driven by Republicans. And what they found was that Republicans went out, they voted to keep abortion, but then they voted down ballot Republican. And so I think come November, we're going to see this in Florida, and we're going to see it in other states. You will have Republicans, if they have the opportunity to split their decision on abortion from their decision on a candidate, Republicans will do well.
Okay, Brianna, I guess I'll leave it with you before I go to Terry with this one, because it's a very fair point. Me personally, we'll set aside Trump for the moment. Me personally, how am I supposed to get excited about a country that may choose Republicans because eggs are too expensive, but they also love abortion? Am I supposed to be excited that we'll elect Republicans who also love abortion?
Yeah, and that's a great conflict that I think a lot of Republicans face. But unfortunately, if Republicans are not able to meet in the middle, right, that's how these elections work. You have to appeal to the average voter. The average voter just tends to statistically show that they support abortion to some extent. Now, it's a moral issue. Of course, abortion is wrong morally. But unfortunately, we don't live in a moral country anymore, right? We live in a political society that they want to make abortion legal up to 9 months. And so if that's the case, you have to play the playing field. And that includes, ending abortion at 8 weeks, right? Setting a limit, like Terry said.
Terry, how am I supposed to feel that, because look, she brings up a great point, and everyone who brings up this point is 100% correct. Republicans nationally, they may be able to win, but on this issue, it probably does hurt us. But what's that say about us as a country, Terry?
Well, I think it really sucks, Jesse, because, this election, if we don't reelect Donald Trump, our choices are very slim in terms of pro-life gains in the future. I mean, we'll be talking about just avoiding jail time. And we have to face the fact that we are up against an entire political party that wants to throw MAGA Republicans in jail. They don't want to just allow you to exist and have your talking points and tweets online. They want to come for you. I mean, they're locking up old grandmas right now that were just praying in the Capitol. So this is coming at a very unfortunate time where Republicans don't really have a lot of options. But the whole point of winning elections is to win on policy. And so, listen, I think we need to pump the brakes on criticizing Trump and just continue to work with him and help him see the opportunity of a 15-week limit to where he can use that to go on offense and also use it to moderate against some of the more extreme versions in the states.
Motion to dismiss the impeachment charges on Thursday. Are you at all concerned that if some Democrats in tough races vote for that, it could come back to haunt them on the campaign trail?
Look, we're going to try and resolve this issue as quickly as possible. Impeachment should never be used to settle policy disagreements.
We're going to try to resolve this issue. Well, it's quite an issue, isn't it? You've been handed an impeachment. You do have to have a trial, right? We'll see if they play that game. Joining me now, a great senator from the state of Wisconsin, Senator Ron Johnson. Senator, look, I can see it coming. I'm sure you can see it coming. There's no way there's going to be an impeachment trial, right? Only Republicans would do something so stupid.
Well, it's certainly what Senator Schumer is talking about right now, and it's pretty obvious why they don't want an impeachment trial, is they don't want the public understanding what a catastrophe their open border policy is. So they want to table this as quickly as possible and move on. But Republicans here in the Senate, we're trying to do everything we can to highlight this issue. We held a press conference yesterday saying that it's our constitutional responsibility to hold a trial when the House managed to send over the articles of impeachment. And it's certainly our responsibility to point out to the American public the clear and present danger that is President Biden and his Democrat colleagues in Congress, their open border policy. And it's extremely important to understand that it's not just President Biden. This is every Democrat in Congress supports an open border. They caused this problem. They just don't want the American public to understand the full extent of it.
Senator, how much power do we have the power to force a trial? People don't understand how this works with motions and this and that. Normal people don't understand how that works. Do we have the juice without the majority to force a trial?
Yeah, probably not. Particularly now the parliamentarian has ruled that a motion to table would be in order. We don't agree with that, but once the parliamentarian rules, that's basically how the Senate operates. But again, we don't have to lay down, and we're not. A number of us contacted Speaker Johnson, who had intended to deliver those articles today at 5 o'clock, setting up Schumer's tabling motion Thursday at 1 o'clock. That's generally when the Senate is adjourning for the week and people are heading back to their states. And so they wanted to snuff this thing out this week. A number of us contacted Speaker Johnson. He didn't really understand the Senate only works till about noon on Thursday. And so he decided to delay delivering those articles so that we can make the point that we should hold a trial. But certainly we can make the point about what a catastrophe Biden's open border policy is.
Yeah, it's obvious they don't want to actually solve this problem, even though old Papa Joe is on TV talking about shutting down the border. Here he was.
Have you made a final decision on taking executive order in terms of what you want to do at the border? That includes the power to shut down the border, as it was suggested.
Well, it's suggested that. We're examining whether or not I have that power.
Why do these people pretend now? It's very obvious to everyone, isn't it, Senator? They don't want the border closed. They want it open.
Well, it's obvious to me. It's obvious to you. But it also should be obvious that President Biden has the authority. President Trump had the authority. Even though it's been weakened by court decisions, a president has, the current laws exude deference, is what the Supreme Court ruled. He has the authority. So President Trump used that authority to close down the border. President Biden used that exact same executive authority and opened it back up. So he has the authority. He just doesn't want to use it because, again, they want an open border. They caused this problem. They just don't want the American public to notice it. But the American public is noticing it primarily because Democrat mayors who touted their sanctuary cities realize that their sanctuary cities are going to be destroyed by President Biden's open border policy. So the mainstream media was forced to start covering this catastrophe.
Senator, switching gears here, there's a couple big debates going on in Congress right now. One of the biggies, probably the biggie, is FISA. Is the government going to keep being able to spy on me and take all my stuff without actually getting a warrant? Are they? Is this something that GOP is finally going to put a stop to?
Well, I was hoping so. I know Chairman Jordan had worked with his committee to require warrants on American citizens. For some reason, the House Intelligence Committee doesn't like that. Other Republicans don't like that. They think it's too restrictive. I don't think it's too restrictive because now we've seen how FISA has been abused by the FBI, by federal law enforcement. So you have to put those types of controls in. I'm not exactly sure what's going to happen. I fear that the fix is in, but I certainly hope that Chairman Jordan's amendments get voted on, because I think if they will be voted on, sounds like they would pass. So again, I don't know exactly how this is going to be disposed of, but from my standpoint, we definitely need to reform FISA. And this is coming from somebody who's supported in the past when we were told, well, show us one American whose constitutional rights have ever been trampled on. Back then, I couldn't point to anybody. Now I can point to a former president of the United States whose constitutional rights were trampled on. So we absolutely need reform to FISA.
Senator, Ukraine aid is obviously the other big thing in the news right now. What do we send? Do we send anything? Do we send nothing? You're a senator with access to a lot of people that I don't have access to. What is the goal for Ukraine? It's one thing to stand up and say, send Ukraine money. That's not a goal. What is the goal? Or do they believe they can push the Russians out? What are they trying to do now?
Well, I fear what they're trying to do is use the Ukrainian people as a proxy in a proxy war against Russia to degrade their military and industrial capacity. But I would argue it's having the exact opposite effect. The war in Ukraine has driven up oil prices. That means that more oil revenue is going to Russia. They're building up their industrial base, their military industrial complex. They're producing more 155 millimeter shells. So I don't see Russia getting weakened in this process. I see Ukraine being destroyed. So from my standpoint, the only way this war in Ukraine ends is in the negotiating table. And any action we take ought to be trying to get Putin to come to the negotiating table to end this bloody stalemate. Because in the end, it's not good for Russia. It's not good to have Russian conscripts die to destroy Ukraine further. But this administration, again, like most Democrats, completely denying reality. I heard Chuck Schumer come out of the White House meeting say it's simple. $60 billion if Ukraine gets it, they win. If not, they lose. How are they going to win? You're not going to displace Russia out of Ukraine. Russia's not going to lose this war. They have 4 times the population. Vladimir Putin losing this war is existential to Vladimir Putin. They have nuclear weapons. They're not going to lose this war. We need to recognize that unfortunate reality.
Senator, finally, Zuckerbucks are no longer, as they're known, they're no longer going to be allowed in Wisconsin. I'm hearing a lot of encouraging news in Wisconsin because of local school board races. We have these ballot initiatives that are going through. Is Wisconsin redder than maybe most people thought it is? I mean, they elected you.
I wish it were. I don't think it is. We're a very evenly divided state. And the fact of the matter is in order to win, we need an incredibly strong ground game. We need community captains. I mean, Democrats, and this is true through other states as well, they've got strongholds in the big Democrat-controlled cities. It's a lot easier to mine all the votes they need in just a couple localities, where Republicans, we have to go throughout the state, every little small town, every small city. We need to get all those votes, so it needs an incredibly strong ground game. Plus, the rules of the elections are set. We may not like them, but we have early voting, you have absentee voting, you have ballot harvesting in Wisconsin. We've got to engage in all of those things. We can't be outvoted prior to election day. We need to do everything else to bank our votes early, and that's what we're certainly encouraging throughout the state of Wisconsin for Republicans to do.